Imagine waking up to a city that stopped breathing. London's streets buried under snow so deep that buses can't move. Big Ben's iconic hands locked in place, frozen at exactly 6:28 in the morning. And then, days later, winds tearing through Scotland with the force of a hurricane. This wasn't an ordinary winter. This was the winter that froze Britain solid, the winter of 1967 to 1968, when the country faced two catastrophes that would redefine what it meant to survive the cold. A blizzard that paralyzed the capital and a deadly storm that Scotland would carry in its memory forever. For everyone who experienced those terrifying weeks in January, winter became something different. Not just chilly weather or pretty snowfall, but nature reminding Britain that no amount of preparation could tame its fury. Early January 1968 felt like any other British winter. People bundled up in their coats, grumbled about the grey skies, and carried on with their routines. But January 8th changed everything. Snow started falling across southern and central England. This wasn't the gentle kind that melts by afternoon. This was merciless, thick snow pushed by powerful southeast winds that showed no sign of stopping. When people woke on January 9th, England was entombed. Drifts climbed as high as 3 meters in certain locations. Mid-Wales recorded 30 centimeters of level snow. Roads disappeared. Train tracks became impassable. Entire villages found themselves completely isolated. And then London witnessed something nobody thought possible. Big Ben froze. The clock that had kept time through world wars, through every crisis Britain had faced, simply stopped at 6:28 in the morning. Snow had accumulated on the clock faces, locking the hands in place. For almost 4 hours, Big Ben stood, silent and motionless. People crossing Westminster Bridge stopped to stare upward. If something as dependable as Big Ben could be defeated by snow, what did that say about everything else? The blizzard brought the country to its knees. Transportation collapsed completely. Trains stuck on frozen tracks. Buses abandoned their routes. Schools emptied. Factories went dark. Families discovered their windows frosted from the inside. Milk bottles frozen solid on doorsteps. And streets buried so completely that parked cars vanished beneath drifts. This wasn't charming snow from holiday postcards. This was vicious, suffocating, life-threatening snow. Anyone brave enough to go outside talked about wind that sliced through even the heaviest coats. Some people had to walk for miles through waist-deep snow just to find assistance. But Britain responded the way it always had, with grim determination and endless tea. Neighbours helped each other dig out. Complete strangers pushed cars together. The postman still made his rounds. Life moved in slow motion, but it kept moving. And just when people started recovering, started clearing the snow, started catching their breath, the real catastrophe was taking shape. Far out in the Atlantic, something dangerous was forming. On January 13th, meteorologists spotted a low-pressure system near Bermuda. Nothing particularly unusual, but this system didn't follow normal patterns. It drifted north of the Azores, still looking weak, still appearing harmless. Then, in fewer than 24 hours, it transformed into a monster. The storm intensified by 50 millibars, meteorological language for something absolutely catastrophic. It shot across the Atlantic at terrifying speed, aimed directly at Scotland. Weather experts predicted it would pass harmlessly to the north, missing the mainland completely. They were catastrophically wrong. On the evening of January 14th, the storm shifted course. It pivoted east, targeting the central belt of Scotland with precision. By the time anyone understood what was approaching, there was no time left to prepare. January 15th, 1968. Most of Scotland was asleep. Families lay warm in their beds. Everything was peaceful and quiet. Then around 3 o'clock in the morning, devastation arrived. Glasgow took the first hit. Winds shrieked through the streets at speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour. Hurricane-force winds slamming into an urban centre, something Scotland had never witnessed before. Roofs were ripped from buildings as if they were made of cardboard. Chimney stacks, massive structures weighing 3 tons of solid brick, crashed straight through tenement roofs, punching through multiple floors before reaching the basement. Windows exploded inward, entire walls crumbled, trees snapped like twigs. The city went completely black as power lines collapsed everywhere. One police spokesman in Glasgow described the scene with just 2 words: absolute havoc. Families woke to nightmare scenarios. On Dumbarton Road, a mother and her 4-year-old daughter, visiting from England for a funeral, were killed instantly when a chimney crashed through their roof while they slept. In the neighbouring flat, another mother and her 10-year-old daughter died exactly the same way. It took rescue crews 12 hours to recover their bodies from the wreckage. All across Glasgow, similar tragedies played out. A pregnant nurse lost her life when falling masonry tore through her apartment, a 5-year-old girl in Anderson, a man in Charing Cross, a woman in Cross Hill. The death count kept rising. 20 people died that night throughout Scotland, 9 of them in Glasgow alone. But the deaths weren't the only nightmare. More than 300 houses in Glasgow were obliterated completely. 70,000 homes sustained damage, half of the city's council housing. In Edinburgh, the famous Scott Monument lost one of its towering spires. Churches collapsed, schools were destroyed, factories were gutted. People compared the destruction to the Clydebank Blitz, that terrible night during World War II when German bombers laid waste to the area. But this time there were no bombers, no enemy planes, just wind with the power of explosives. Beyond the cities, the devastation continued. 8,000 hectares of woodland completely destroyed. Over 1,000 mature trees brought down in the central belt alone. 7 ships sank in the River Clyde. The storm's rage extended further, reaching Denmark where 8 more people perished. When dawn finally broke on January 15th, people emerged from their homes into scenes that looked like war zones, streets choked with rubble, cars crushed flat beneath fallen stone, the air thick with dust and the sharp smell of shattered buildings. It was Scotland's worst natural disaster in recorded history, and nobody had predicted it would happen. The human toll was staggering. Beyond the 20 who died during the storm itself, another 30 would die in the weeks after. Roofers, construction workers, ordinary citizens trying to repair damaged homes, falling from roofs crushed by unstable walls, killed by the very structures they were attempting to save. 700 people lost their homes immediately. Thousands more lived in houses with gaping holes in the roof, covered only by tarps that flapped uselessly against the continuing wind and rain. The government's response was insulting. Harold Wilson's Labour government offered an interest-free loan of £500,000, a loan, not a grant, for damage estimated at £30 million. The previous year, when the Torrey Canyon oil tanker ran aground off Land's End, £1.5 million was provided immediately. But Scotland, just 400 miles from London, wasn't considered newsworthy enough. National press coverage was pitiful. Yet through everything, the Scottish people's response was remarkable. Soldiers arrived from Edinburgh to assist with clean-up. Singer Frankie Vaughan organised a benefit concert to raise funds. Neighbours who'd barely acknowledged each other before worked shoulder to shoulder clearing debris. Strangers welcomed homeless families into their own homes. There was no chaos, no looting, just quiet resolve to rebuild. The January storm of 1968 forced changes. The Met Office, humiliated by their failure to predict the storm's path, poured resources into better technology and improved models. Building codes were completely overhauled. roofs had to meet higher standards. Glasgow City Council used the disaster to push through housing reforms they'd wanted for years. The old, crumbling tenements that had failed so catastrophically were designated for demolition. But for those who survived it, no improvement could undo what occurred. Nothing could bring back the 20 people who died that night. Nothing could erase the memory of waking to find your home destroyed, your street transformed into a wasteland, your city shattered. Ask anyone who was there, they'll remember the sound first. The roar of wind like a freight train bearing down, the crack of timber breaking, the thunderous crash of masonry hitting ground. They'll describe the silence that followed, the strange quiet as dawn illuminated a ruined Glasgow. And they'll talk about the smell. Dust everywhere, broken plaster, wet, splintered wood, the unmistakable smell of destruction. The winter of 1967 to 1968 wasn't Britain's coldest on record. It wasn't even the snowiest. But it was arguably the most violent. 2 disasters within 2 weeks. First, the blizzard that paralyzed the south, then the storm that demolished the north. For those few days in January, Britain learned that nature doesn't respect human plans or forecasts or confidence. The Great Freeze of 1963 gets mentioned more often. The Winter of Discontent in 1979 gets discussed more frequently. But the winter of 1968 belongs to Scotland. The winter when a storm arrived with no warning and altered everything in 2 hours. The winter that proved even Big Ben wasn't invincible. The winter that taught Britain it was never as ready as it believed. Give this a like if it resonated with you. Subscribe to keep these historical stories alive and leave a comment about where you were in January 1968. Did this storm affect you? I read every single comment and love hearing your stories.